Hello there, welcome to my official rankings, gradings, whatever you want to call them, of all of the Smackdown, SvR, and WWE 2K games. Now, originally, I was just going to go balls to the wall every single WWE game ever, but this video is going to be long enough as it is. We can get into other games later. This is, for all intents and purposes, this is the main series of SmackDown games, right? I like to think of WWE 2K as the spiritual successor to the SvR series, which in and of itself is the spiritual successor to the SmackDown series. So we're going to start right away with the game that started it all. And you'll notice that, yes, I did title this video grading all of the SmackDown games, but we are ranking them on a, we're grading them on a number scale. I just figured this is more, anyone can look at this and know what we're talking about. And if you need even more foolproofing, green good, red bad, right? This streamlines it, simplifies it for my little peanut brain, so hopefully it does the same for yours. But yeah, that being said, the game that started it all, the very first SmackDown game that I have proudly behind me on my shelf, you just can't overstate how important the very first SmackDown game on the PlayStation was. I mean, prior to the first SmackDown game on PS1, the N64 was the console for wrestling games. It just was. It was no contest. And you can make the argument that even after the release of the first SmackDown, the N64 was still the definitive console for pro wrestling games. But you could have a conversation. It was a debate after the first SmackDown game because the N64, they had World Tour, they had WCW NWO Revenge, the WrestleMania 2000. I mean, those games, fantastic. And the PlayStation, all they had was Warzone, Attitude, and maybe some arcade ports. And no offense to those games, for their time period, they were fine. They were serviceable, I guess. Graphically, you could make an argument that those Acclaim games looked better than the THQ Ukes games on the N64. That's kind of a personal preference thing. But from a gameplay perspective, I don't even know how you could objectively say that the Aki games weren't leaps and bounds ahead of the Acclaim games. So when this game came out, when THQ published this game on the PlayStation, it finally gave that console a series that they could be proud of, that they can play. It was much more approachable than the Acclaim games. I mean, anybody could pick up a controller and figure out what they were doing. It was arcade style, but it was just so fun, and the game was such a reflection of that time period in the sense that you felt like anything could happen. It was, roaming backstage, all of the environments, how they were interconnected, all the different match types, just a great roster, but that speaks more to the time period that the game was in. It was just a great pick up and play first initial foray onto the PlayStation for the SmackDown series. They knocked it out of the park. And for a lot of these games, I think context is important, and you have to not look at these games in a vacuum, but the time period at which they were released. And that being said, SmackDown was just so far ahead of its contemporaries on the PlayStation. So much so that some of my friends even preferred this game to the N64 games, which is probably the highest praise you can give to this game. Real simple, quick grapples, movesets were very limited, but what do you want from this game? It was a pick up and play. It played like a beat 'em up, kinda, There was not too much strategy. It was just build up enough momentum, hit a finisher, you would win. You could win by knockout a lot of times. You could toggle that off from the settings. Decent amount of arenas. There was a season mode that you can play through, which was very bare bones compared to what it would become. But this game just graphically looked good, but the gameplay was so what's the word I'm looking for? Revolutionary. It was so impactful that we're going to talk about SmackDown games years down the line. We'll get into it. That used animations from this very first SmackDown game years down the road. The very first SmackDown game, its handprints are all over some of these later games, which is just that speaks volumes to me. So that being said, it's kind of difficult to rank this one because of all the things I just said. If you go back and play it, I feel it still holds up. It's still fun to this day to pick up and play. Um, the first SmackDown game, I'm going to give it, I think an 8 out of 10 is appropriate. Because it is still a good game to this day. It was a monumental game when it came out. And yeah, it started all the games we're going to talk about here. Without this first SmackDown game, you don't have 2K25. I really believe that. So you give credit where credit is due. It had a good creation suite for the time. A great creation suite, I'd say. You could edit actual superstars too. They had their parts just all over the creation suite, which was kind of fun. You could like mix and mash characters and make them look really crazy if you wanted to, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about having fun and letting your creativity flow in these creation modes. And excuse me, the first SmackDown game, it really laid down the blueprint for what subsequent entries in the series would be, what you expect from it. You expected a season mode. You expected great gameplay that you could pick up and play. You expected fantastic backstage areas. Did I say creation suite already? You expected a fantastic creation suite. And this game, you got to give credit where credit is due. It's an 8 out of 10 game, which is tremendous on this scale. 5 is average, okay? Not this 7 is average bullcrap that you see from IGN. No, 5 is average. So anything over 5 is a good game on the main event minute. For Joe Wrestling here, above a 5 is a good game. And this game is more than a good game. It's a great game, which is why it's green. You guys like how I did that? I made it green. Okay, moving on. We just spent 7 minutes talking about one game. Buckle in. This could be a long video. SmackDown 2. Now, everything I just mentioned about the first SmackDown game, all the good qualities that I mentioned, SmackDown 2, I feel, did what any good sequel is supposed to do, and that is improve on its predecessor. And it did. Expanded roster, the season mode actually had cutscenes, and yeah, there was... let's just get this out of the way right off the bat. There were too many damn loading screens in that season mode. You had to watch those battling meters for every single match, even ones you weren't participating in your season mode, which, you know, that sucked. It was tedious, but for the time period, you kind of put up with a lot of loading screens. Games were getting so big at that point on the PS1. If any of you guys who played JRPGs at the time, you know that loading screens were very prominent, very prevalent in this era. And, you know, SmackDown 2 was no exception, but I think this game really suffers because of it. But outside of that, that's like my lone con of the game. Outside of that, it expanded so much, added more match types. The Hell in a Cell that was first introduced in this game, that became, you want to talk about blueprints. I mean, every single game, the Hell in a Cell just kind of, it built upon this one. And it's the most iconic match type probably in WWE history. I think we can probably all agree on that, right? And it's such a core part of what these wrestling games were. I mean, getting your buddies together and duking it out inside the cell. I mean, that back then, you couldn't have more fun than that. I mean, that was the go-to match type. It's not so much for me anymore because they kind of play a lot more slowly now that we're at a more simulation style era of gameplay. But yeah, I mean, the Hell in a Cell was a big deal. I won't spend too much more time talking about it. The season mode, yes, it does suffer from a lot of loading screens, but it had cutscenes. There were like storylines going in and, you know, unlockable characters that you would get after playing through their stories that would just, you know, trickle down throughout the season. It was fun, you know, win championships, main event pay-per-views. You could keep track of rankings and standings. It was like a little mini universe mode that we know today, I guess. So yeah, I mean, the roster, of course, was a lot better because, you know, by this time the Radicals had made their jump over to WWE, so you get to play as all those guys. And I can't say enough good things about it. Did it innovate a ton from the first SmackDown game? No, but you gotta remember these were released within a year of each other. And I will say this about SmackDown 2. It if the first SmackDown game like was the, kick in through the front door, SmackDown 2 was the planting of the flag that PlayStation and WWE games were here to stay. They were real contenders on that platform. I'm going to give SmackDown 2 an 8 out of 10 also because it's a great game. It's not different enough from SmackDown 1 to be like a 9 out of 10, but it definitely improved a lot. And the only reason why it's not ranked higher than the first SmackDown game is because the first SmackDown game gets a bonus point for being the first. Does that make sense? I think that's a fair thing for me to say because nothing came before it. It laid the groundwork. It was the foundation. It was seminal. The first SmackDown game. Okay, so 2 great games to start off here, right? Now, a lot of you probably think this is where things are going to go downhill, and you might be right to an extent. SmackDown Just Bring It was the first game I ever got personally with my PS2. I got Just Bring It and Simpsons Hit and Run. A couple of good games. Well, I guess that's subjective. No. For me, they were both good games. SmackDown Just Bring It. Of course, that intro is infamous at this point, right? It showcased like all the CGI that the next-gen PS2 console could do. And then you got to the gameplay, and it certainly didn't live up to that. Hell, you could make the case that games today don't even look that good, right? Go look up that intro if you guys haven't on YouTube or something. Look at the SmackDown Just Bring It intro. Probably all of you have seen it if you're watching this video. But yeah, the game itself, it did a lot of things that I liked. You could have, 8 people in the ring at once, which it took years to be able to do that again. They really took advantage of the next-gen hardware. The lighting in the arenas was kind of, they overdid it, certainly. Like, for entrances and stuff, they went crazy with all the lighting effects. Like, some guys who didn't have, those flashing lights coming out still had it in their entrances just because they were, like, THQ and Ukes just wanted to, like, shove it in your face. Like, they wanted to show off all the bells and whistles of the new PS2. The roster was a little bit outdated at this point when the game came out. I think that the game suffers for that, but it was still a serviceable roster. Great match types that you would expect to see were here, brought over from SmackDown 2. The gameplay was largely the same, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It transitioned well to the next gen, which is more than you can say about some later games we'll talk about. The story mode was a little underwhelming because it was so short. You had limited time that you could roam backstage. Like you'd only have 1 or 2 minutes to go backstage and find people to talk to that would set up different branching storylines that could unlock different wrestlers. That was kind of stressful. But the backstage area was really cool, and the graphics have a certain amount of charm to them. I think they do actually hold up relatively well today as well. But yeah, the story mode being really short, I mean, no more than a few matches per story, and then you'd have to start over and go down a different branching path. But yeah, I am very nostalgic about this game, but if I look at it without the rose-colored glasses and just kind of objectively break it down, SmackDown Just Bring It is a fine game, I think. The first game on PS2, they could have certainly fallen flat on their face. I don't think they did that. I think it's an average game. I think it's overhated. People like to think of this game as being among the worst WWE games, and I just don't see that. I mean, it was fun. The gameplay was fun. And at the end of the day, I don't know how many times I've said this on the channel before. I don't know how many more times I'm going to say this during the course of this video. But at the end of the day, folks, if your gameplay is good, if the core wrestling mechanics are good in your wrestling game, you can't be a bad wrestling game. It's a wrestling game. So if the wrestling is fun, which I think it is in Just Bring It, then it's a decent enough wrestling game. Now, sure, it didn't have a lot of features. They had a good creation suite, but you couldn't really make your guy look exactly how you wanted him to, like you could in the first SmackDown games. The face would always end up looking stupid. The mouth was always open. But it did have create an animation or create a taunt, which was cool. So that was pretty neat. But outside of that, yeah, the gameplay is pretty much identical to the first SmackDown games, what made those games so good. So for me, the lack of modes and the lack of story depth is not enough to tank this game to below average status. Is that fair? I think that's totally fair. Okay, let me take a little sip of water here. I'm talking a lot. Smackdown, shut your mouth. I made a video talking about my favorite wrestling game of all time and how it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. Because if you ask me what the best wrestling game is, my answer will change on a day-to-day basis. You know, some days I'll say No Mercy, some days I'll tell you Day of Reckoning. But my favorite has always remained the same, and it's still true to this day, and that's SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. It just... maybe you were discouraged by seeing Just Bring It, like seeing the SmackDown series on next-gen hardware. Maybe you thought after seeing Just Bring It, okay, maybe like the PS2 era of SmackDown games is not going to be that big of a jump. Shut Your Mouth blew all of those expectations out of the water entirely. I mean, graphically, a massive step up from Just Bring It. Today, I think this game holds up graphically better than a lot of games we're going to talk about that came out years later. Because it has a certain like cartoony aesthetic to it. Like the color palette is so charming, I guess, that the graphics, they're ageless, they're timeless. Timeless Tony Storm. Shut Your Mouth was a visual marvel at the time, and I think it still is today. If you emulate it with like HD textures turned on, it looks phenomenal. The gameplay was largely the same as the first few games, which is, again, not a bad thing at all. The Creation Suite was greatly expanded and is only brought down a little bit because of the long loading times in between looking at creation parts and stuff, but with the body morphing, you could truly make your guy look like a monstrosity if you want to. You could make any... I mean, I think Shut Your Mouth was the first game that had like a lot of formulas online. You know, they had one for everybody, like Scott Hall, Shane McMahon. They had pretty much any wrestler you can think of. To this day, you can find like creation formulas for them in SmackDown Shut Your Mouth because you could truly make anybody you wanted in that game. You could create animations, taunts, stuff like that. It was super in-depth. And the Hell in a Cell plays like a proper Hell in a Cell. You actually have room between the ring and the cell. Not a lot, but you could like interact with the cell walls and stuff. The backstage area is my favorite out of all of these games. It's massive. You can go downtown, you know, you can go to WWF New York, you can ride the subway, you can do crazy things in this game, throw snowballs at people. The season mode is my favorite out of any of these games. I feel like that season mode is unmatched to this day. You can play through multiple years, pick any superstar you want, you can create one or take one on the roster. You can partake in an initial draft at the beginning, and then, play through a couple years. And it's a non-linear story, branching paths. You don't have to do anything in it. You don't have to win any matches. You don't have to lose any matches. The story will progress regardless. You can request title shots. You can request, join factions. You can make alliances. You can make enemies. There are real-life storylines that play out kind of loosely in the season mode, like the NWO invasion and Vince and Ric Flair going after each other. You can pick sides. You can side with the owners, or you can lead the superstars to rebel against them. It's such a great season mode, and we certainly have gotten far away from it now. I wish we would go back to this, because the kind of control you had, I mean, you could add superstars and remove them from the roster at the beginning of the season and create your own stables and stuff. This was really like the start of what we now know as universe mode, but just like turned up to the max degree. Can't say enough good things about the season mode. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's stuck on normal difficulty. Even if you put your game on legend difficulty from the options setting, that only affects like exhibition mode. It doesn't affect the season mode. So I think this game suffers from being overly simple, like too easy, and that's a little bit unfortunate. But outside of that, you guys, just a great game. To any of you youngsters who have never played SmackDown, shut your mouth. You're doing yourself a disservice. This is as close to a 10 out of 10 game as you can get. It really is for me. In my heart of hearts, it's a 10 out of 10. But there's not a lot of depth to the gameplay. As fun as it is, I mean, you can do crazy spots in this game. You can climb up on Titantrons, jump off the Smackdown fist, jump off the King of the Ring throne or chair. Yeah, man, it's just, when I think about all the shenanigans, especially in season mode, because the seasons change, and if you go outside, like, you'll notice the weather changing, and like I said, you can throw snowballs at each other. The shopping carts that are now being reintroduced into the game in 2K26, they were already here. The weapons are fantastic in this game. They feel good. They feel impactful. Climbing is a breeze, so like ladder matches are a hell of a lot of fun. Super simple to put people through tables. You can do anything you want to do, like big spots, and it's seamless, you know? So yeah, that's enough. I could honestly talk about SmackDown Shut Your Mouth all day, but we still have a lot of games to get to. But yeah, a 9 out of 10 game. It's about as close to perfect as you can get for me. In my heart, it's a 10 out of 10, but I do think there are better games. I'll say that. Okay, moving on to Smackdown Here Comes the Pain. I mean, what can I say about this damn game that hasn't been said a million times? It is a masterpiece, right? Now, graphically, it has its own style, certainly. I don't like the visuals as much as Shut Your Mouth. But graphics are really secondary to me, or third to me, even. I mean, I don't know what order to put them in, but I just don't value graphics as highly as the next person, so that's whatever to me. I do think they have their own sort of charm, though, certainly. Let's just talk about the gameplay, I guess, because that is the be-all, end-all. And this was the first game in the series to truly innovate for gameplay with their grappling system, where now you, instead of just doing, circle and a direction on the direction pad to do a type of grapple, now you could set up moves by doing directional grappling. Like, you could do submission grapples, you could do strong grapples, your signature grapples, and from those initial tie-ups, you can then branch out and do more moves. So each superstar's moveset was greatly expanded. You now had, and this was big and would stay in the series for years, for the superstar HUDs, where your spirit meter or adrenaline, whatever you want to call it, where you built up to your finishers, you now had limb body part indicators that would show you how much damage you're doing in real time, which was awesome because it added so much more depth and strategy to the gameplay. I know this is stuff we take for granted now because it's still in the game to this day, which should show you how important it was that 23 years ago now. Jesus, I am so old. The limb targeting or whatever, the limb indicators were introduced in this game. It was a huge deal. It added new strategy to being able to target specific body parts. Blood, of course, made its debut in this game. The weapons felt extremely good to use. Speaking about gameplay though, struggle submissions, like you'd button mash when you put people in submissions, and you could actually see a meter that would show your progress to breaking out of the submission or successfully making your opponent tap out. Big deal. But yeah, more match types. Everything was just turned up. So much more attention to detail, and here comes the pain. But it still didn't forget that it was a video game. For all of this realism and this in-depth simulation-style wrestling that was included in the game, it didn't forget it was a game, and it took advantage of that fact, and you could still blow up wrestlers and blow up cars and go downtown and jump off of helicopters, off of buildings and stuff. Great backstage areas. You could ride in vehicles. It was... I've said before on the channel that there's a fine line between sim and arcade, and that line coincides with fun and not fun in your video game. And I think the best wrestling games of all time walk that line, between sim and arcade. And I think Here Comes the Pain is like the shining example of that. The season mode is it's only a singular year as opposed to the two from Shut Your Mouth. But it still follows that same non-linear formula where you are not railroaded into anything. You could challenge for any title as long as you meet like the superstar point requirements. You can request show transfers. You couldn't roam backstage freely like in Shut Your Mouth, but you could still talk to people. It was just like from a menu now. But yeah, the funny interactions with that. You could set up matches and storylines. You could form alliances, stables, and of course you can customize the rosters for all these season modes too. You could edit like who's heel and who's a baby face, and that would affect your interactions with them. Yeah, really cool stuff. The creation suite, of course, was again just phenomenal. And Here Comes the Pain. Still a lot of loading screens between like menus, but not as bad as Shut Your Mouth. Yeah, man, it's Smackdown Here Comes the Pain. I mean, what am I doing spending all this time talking about it? You guys know that this game is a 10. That doesn't mean that it's without its flaws, but a 10 for me means that like the pros are so damn strong that any kind of shortcomings are more than made up for. Here Comes the Pain is just the blueprint, I guess, for what a good wrestling game should be. So I think it's THQ and Yuke's Mona Lisa. I really do. It is the best game that they've ever made. Okay, moving on here. Let me get another sip of water. I've been talking for almost a half hour. If you're still with me at this point, I love you. Thank you for putting up with this rambling lunatic. Smackdown versus Raw. This game, for some people, I'm not going to say where I stand on it yet, but for some people, this was the beginning of the decline of the Smackdown series. Not for me. Spoiler alert. I love this game. Like, I don't like this game. I love Smackdown versus Raw. Visually, I think it looks better than Here Comes the Pain. We'll just throw that out there because, I don't want to spend too much time on graphics, but it does look better. The gameplay, I think, is better than Here Comes the Pain. Yeah, I said it. I'll say it again. I think the gameplay of Smackdown vs. Raw, the first one, is better than Here Comes the Pain, and I'll tell you why. The pre-match minigames added so much more like real-life simulation feel to it. You could do like shoving contests, a stare-down battle, a test of strength. But beyond that, the gameplay incentivized you to like role play a little bit. If you were playing as a babyface, then by playing up to the crowd, doing taunts, signature moves, high risk maneuvers off the top rope, playing within the rules, you'd be rewarded for it by filling up your clean meter. And if you filled it up, you could activate your reward, which would be like you'd Hulk up, like Hogan or Daniel Bryan, or, when you are invincible, and you would automatically reverse any attack, and you do extra damage. You would get a buff. You'd be rewarded for playing clean. And likewise, if you were a bad guy, you could fill up your dirty meter by cheating, by holding on to a submission after your opponent reaches the ropes before the ref hits the 5 count, which was fun to do. And yeah, just, using weapons, removing the turnbuckle pad, complaining on a long 2 count to the referee. And if you filled up your dirty meter, you would get like a super powerful low blow that would have the same like impact as a finisher would. And it still had all of the grappling system from Here Comes the Pain. So everything you liked about Here Comes the Pain, SmackDown vs. Raw just built on and added more depth. So yeah, I stand by what I said. The first SmackDown vs. Raw, I think, has better gameplay than Here Comes the Pain. But is it as good of a game as Here Comes the Pain? I don't think it is. It lost a lot of the fun of the backstage areas. I mean, you had the parking lot brawl in here, but it was, you know, you couldn't do some of the outlandish, wacky things that you could in Here Comes the Pain. You didn't have like total freedom. Um, Also, the season mode, while it is non-linear, like there was always a story going on for you. So, for example, if you were starting a season mode as John Cena, you would have a choice to, and say you had enough superstar points for this, you were able to go after a title of your choosing, WWE title or US title. Now, it doesn't matter which title you go after, the story will be the same. It's the championship story for either title. So it's like the illusion of choice, kind of. If you don't want to challenge for a title entirely, then you'll be locked into a different feud. Each month, you're guaranteed to be locked into a feud. Whereas in Here Comes the Pain and Shut Your Mouth, you were never locked into a feud. If you had nothing going on, like you weren't involved in a story, like you didn't have enough superstar points to be in the King of the Ring tournament, for example, you could make your own story by requesting a title shot or finding someone backstage to beef with and start like a program with them that would last sometimes multiple weeks. In SmackDown vs. Raw, you didn't have that. You were very railroaded, which I think really hurted the game in the long run. Hurt the game in the long run. I don't know how to talk. You'd be amazed how bad my English is by how much I like to talk, but I digress. The season mode is a big deal to me, and because we were coming off of two back-to-back just absolute banger season modes, this one kind of took a step back. It did have voiceover for every superstar other than yours, which was kind of broke your immersion a little bit. And you can make little choices that would just determine if you were like a babyface or a heel within your story, which all that did was just like set whether or not you were clean or dirty for your tactics in match. But yeah, the creation suite I don't think was as good as Here Comes the Pain and Shut Your Mouth. You were more limited, and yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna give the first SmackDown vs. Raw an 8 out of 10. Because yeah, it lost a little bit. It was starting to shift too far away from arcade and too much more into simulation. I still think it was a great game. And yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say about that. And that's the bottom line. SmackDown vs. Raw 2006. The last PS2 exclusive. Well, the last Sony exclusive, I should say. We'll get into that in a bit. This game really upped the polygon count. I guess I'll just talk about graphics straight away for all of these games just so we get it out of the way. Really, really upped the polygon count. I mean, these were about as good as graphics as you could get on the PS2. And this was also... Oh, I forgot to mention this about SmackDown vs. Raw. Part of why I like it so much is because it used like a real soundtrack. And so did 2006. Which was cool. It still retained the clean and dirty tactics, had the same kind of grappling system. The backstage shenanigans was again limited compared to previous games. The creation suite, not as in-depth as Here Comes the Pain and Shut Your Mouth and the first few SmackDown games, honestly. But still serviceable. The story mode was now completely railroaded. I mean, you always were guaranteed to be in specific feuds depending on who your superstar was, but at least they were voiced over now. I like the gameplay a lot of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, and why it gets extra points with me too is the PSP port is so freaking fantastic. And a lot of these later SmackDown vs. Raw games were also ported to the PSP, but they didn't do it as well as 2006. Some of these later ones, I mean, they don't look as good. There were a lot of compromises made with them, especially like with the crowd size and how the visuals and stuff. But the PS2, PSP version of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006, they were like exact. You know, just visually, of course, because it had to fit the PSP screen resolution. It didn't have like the polygon depth that the PS2 version did, obviously, but it played exactly the same. Exactly the same. And I don't know. That was a technical marvel to me. It still is to this day, but especially so at the time. So it does get bonus points for me there too. And the loading screens are just nowhere near as bad as they are in later SVR games on the PSP. Like 2007 is super bad with the loading screens in between menus. 2006 was it was the best PSP SmackDown versus Raw game. But I want to get back to just talking about the game itself. The story mode, not as good as some of the previous ones. Probably the worst to date if you're not including Just Bring It. You know, I think about like the Legends tour. I think about like Triple H and the Shelton Benjamin story. I think about you know, there's a few that stand out to me. Eddie Guerrero stealing the Undertaker's urn. There are some fun stories, but I don't know, nothing too crazy. And I don't like how linear it was. And it really didn't matter if you won or lost in this story mode or season mode, but like in a bad way. Because it really didn't matter. Like in Shut Your Mouth and Here Comes the Pain, it didn't matter if you won or lost because the story would progress accordingly to that. Like if you lost, there would be consequences. At one point in the Shut Your Mouth season mode, you could lose a loser leaves or is fired match. And if you lost, you'd really be fired. And they would show your guy like sadly drinking in a tavern. You'd be off for months until you got reinstated. But in 2006, if you won or lost, there would be no like different cutscene or anything. It really didn't matter, which was disappointing. I got like a mustache hair in my mouth or something. At least I hope that's a mustache hair, for God's sake. So yeah, it didn't do enough to innovate from SmackDown vs. Raw, but it's still a really good game. And I'd like to give it an 8 out of 10. Truth be told, it's probably somewhere between a 7 and an 8. This is a really tough one for me. Let me say one other thing though too that might push it up to an 8 out of 10 for me. I love GM mode. This version of GM mode, not the board game GM mode that we have these days, but an actual like drafting your roster and competing with another brand, putting on great matches, putting together storylines and feuds, hiring writers, checking out the WWE.com articles and stuff, looking at the fan chart graph from a week-to-week basis. It's an 8 out of 10 game. It is. Especially because the ports of it were so damn good. So it's getting crowded in those great games. But what can I say? THQ and Ukes were pumping out magic at this time. I don't know what else to say. Okay, moving on to SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. And if there's going to be a few of you that are here that were with me from the very beginning of this channel, and if you are, I love you. Thank you for your support. You guys know that when I did my tier list, it was a personal tier list of just like my favorite games. And I had SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 in the S tier because I'm very nostalgic about it. It's probably, I don't know, man. Between that and Shut Your Mouth, it's the two games I logged the most hours into. This was the first SmackDown vs. Raw game to be on next gen, like the HD era. It was on the Xbox 360, not the PS3, just the 360. And oh my god, I made an entire video just talking about the hype leading up to this freaking game and how amazing the screenshots were. I would just pour over pages of GamePro magazine just like drooling over how good those screenshots looked. And then I saw the first trailer in motion, and it wasn't actual gameplay footage, but it was John Cena and Kurt Angle kind of duking it out in the crowd and stuff, and just seeing the sweat pour out of them as the match progressed. I was like, okay, we've reached the peak officially. It will never get better than this graphically. I mean, of course I was wrong, but man, what a huge step up graphically. Yeah, this game really, it completely revamped the controls, and now you had you had more control over your grapples, like carry grapples. You could lift your opponent in numerous ways and then slam them or drop them however you see fit. You could transition from a fireman's carry to a power bomb. There were you could just so much control. Like you could control the frequency and how fast or slow you rammed your opponent's head into objects like the steps or the turnbuckle. You could control the speed and the depth of your chops. You could bounce your opponent on the ropes and control the frequency. It was just like all about control. That was like a big selling point of the gameplay, and they delivered, man. I mean, you really felt like you could do whatever you wanted without limitations in a match. The season mode was pretty much exactly the same as 2006. But at least in 2007, in your little locker room hub, you had like emails and stuff you could read, and superstars would leave you voice messages, and you could read like a WWE magazine. It had like a little more immersion for the season mode, I guess, but it still really didn't matter if you won or lost for the most part. But I love the gameplay in this game. The GM mode is almost the same as 2006's. I still like this version of GM mode better than later ones. And, other than that, Creation Suite was, again, a little bit limited. You had Create an Entrance, of course. Not to the depth that you got on, like, other platforms, like the Raw games and stuff that were released years before. But, still pretty good. Probably my favorite soundtrack out of all of these, too. That's worth mentioning. So while it is one of my favorite wrestling games, I don't know if it's one of the best, and I don't know that it innovated enough from 2006. So I think I'm going to put it at 7, because, and again, that is a good game on my scale. I love SmackDown vs. Raw 2007. I think it's a tremendous game, and while it is one of my favorites, I recently went back and played through it, and 2006. I was just replaying through all of them, and I thought 2006 actually held up a little bit better, to be honest with you, which is crazy because as a kid, I always liked 2007 more. But, going back now in my 30s, I thought 2006 played better than 2007. But I love 2007, and I really tip my cap to THQ and Ukes for, actually innovating here with the gameplay. Because the gameplay really is the star of the show in 2007. I just don't think they added enough to the season mode or the GM mode to warrant it being on the same level as 2006 or better. Okay, moving on to 2008. This is a very divisive one in the community. A lot of people hate this game. A lot of people say this is where the SmackDown series started to go downhill. I don't know, man. I might agree with that. The 24/7 mode was a disaster. It just was nonsensical. There was no continuity. You would be in a story to be the number one contender. You would earn that right, and then the next month you would be like in some kind of feud about a movie role for an upcoming WWE film. Like, nothing made sense. It was just kind of thrown together. That was a huge disappointment. Of course, the backstage areas are just really on the back burner at this point, which is disappointing. They did introduce like different styles, like the high flyer, the hardcore, the powerhouse, which was, that was fun. But the gameplay, things were just starting to become way too animation based for me. And I do like the soundtrack, I'll give it that much. Graphically, it doesn't look too much better than the next-gen 2007 version. And the gameplay is not particularly my cup of tea either, I will say. But I do like the game. I just don't think it's one of the better ones. So that being said, and the Creation Suite, of course, is just this kind of what became the standard Creation Suite for a while here, like these 06, 07, 08. Not too big of a discrepancy between them. but I really liked. I see for so many of these games are so nostalgic for me, but I kind of have to take that out of it. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and put this game on the same level as Just Bring It. I think it's an average game. I think there are worse games that I'm gonna talk about, and I think there are much better games. So I'm gonna keep it there for now. Maybe I'll move it around as we complete this list. But for me, this game doesn't do anything exceptionally well. That's what prevents it from being in the higher numbers, the higher ratings, the higher grades. Okay, moving on to SmackDown vs. Raw 2009. I'm going to sound like a broken record. Some people think this is where the SmackDown series started to decline. Because this game completely did away with the season modes or story modes and had the road to WrestleMania, which was like 5 or 6 different linear stories that took place over a 3-month period from January to WrestleMania. And they ditched the season mode in favor of like a more focused narrative where like they could just do more, because if you're playing as Chris Jericho, people could refer to you as Chris Jericho, the commentators can speak about you as Chris Jericho, and it's more easy, right? And I did like those Road to WrestleMania stories, but they're linear, of course they are. The tag team matches, that was the big selling point of 2009. The revamped tag matches, and boy, did they knock it out of the park. They were fun. You were actually, because for all of these games prior, all of them, if you were in a tag team match, they played exactly the same. They were kind of annoying. You had to always run over and hit the guy on the apron before you pinned whoever you did the move to in the ring, and sometimes by the time you did that, the guy you incapacitated would get back up, and it was just tedious and annoying. And if you weren't the legal man, you just felt kind of useless. But in 2009, you could actually like build up to a hot tag. There were new tag team moves you could do, tag team finishers. They did a great job with that. I do like SmackDown vs. Raw 2009 a lot. The gameplay, again, we're fully into like animation-based gameplay, and we're going to be like that for a little bit in the SmackDown vs. Raw series. Water sip here. But it is still kind of pick up and play. And it's a fun game. But where does it rank on this scale here? I do like it more than 2008, I think. I've been talking for over 45 minutes now. That's why I'm trying to get through this here, because this video is gonna take like 3 years to upload to YouTube. But yeah, I think a 6 out of 10 is appropriate because it took away some things that I really loved. Like GM mode was now missing, which sucked, and that would be gone for a long, long time. And the iteration of it that I liked would be permanently gone. So that sucks. But it did innovate, add new features, and I'll tip my cap to that. We'll move on to 2010. And graphically, I'll say like all of these games are starting to look the same from a year-to-year basis, which is not a bad thing. The presentation is good. 2010, again, uses the Road to WrestleMania formula. But what I love about 2010 is the debut of the story designer, which was, one of my favorite features, game modes, whatever you want to call, ever. And it was first introduced in this game right here. So that definitely boosts its stock, because you could also like download other people's stories and stuff. Community creations were starting to become a big deal at this point. But outside of that, yeah, the gameplay is definitely not my cup of tea. Like, weapons were becoming not fun to use anymore. The gameplay was very stale at this point, because I feel like 2008, 2009, and 2010, you could tell that like that engine was just being like layered upon, but not in a good way. You know how Madden from a year-to-year basis just feels like somehow it gets more clunky, even though they're adding new features and stuff? It's just because like they're coding over old code like repeatedly. That's kind of how 2010 started to feel for me. And yeah, that's not a good thing. I I don't know, there's nothing really special or remarkable about this game. And I didn't care for the gameplay too much. Backstage areas officially were like, they sucked. The creation suite, of course, also was not. It did have story designer, which was cool. But outside of that, they didn't expand too much. And I'm trying to think about 2010. Was that when they introduced Create an Arena? Although it was more like Customize an Arena. I'm trying to think now. I replayed through 2010 recently for a video. I think 5 out of 10 is probably appropriate. Because Create an Arena, or Customize an Arena, I don't think really got good until the 2K. Like, 2K took over. So I'll leave it there for now. How does that look? Do I look at these 3 games on a similar level? Just Bring It, 2008, and 2010? I think I do, you guys. I think I do view those on the same kind of level. Okay, Smackdown vs. Raw 2011. I've made so many videos about so many of these games. 2011. The last Smackdown vs. Raw game. They went out with a bang. Universe Mode. Universe Mode was first introduced in this game, and it's one of the best versions of Universe Mode to this day. Just adding, like, a living, breathing, like, ecosystem to everyone's game. Your copy, your save file of SvR 2011 is unique to you, and nobody else has that. And a large part of that is SmackDown vs. Raw 2011. The gameplay in this game is phenomenal because weapons became fun again. The physics engine in this game is my favorite out of any WWE game ever, including all the ones I've talked prior to this and all the ones I'm going to talk about later. This was the best physics engine. Ladders were so much fun. They fell organically. Going through tables was seamless. You could go through tables in a variety of different ways. Stacking them, and they just broke so satisfyingly. But yeah, chairs and stuff too. Everything just felt so good in this game. And the Universe Mode story designer was back. The creation suite was starting to get better. I love SmackDown vs. Raw 2011. They were still on the road to WrestleMania formula, which is better than what we would get later. I'm going to go ahead. You guys, I really like SvR 2011 because they got the gameplay right. So I do think it's better than 07, but I wouldn't put it on the same tier as these two. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. But to be honest, it's probably like an 8.5 out of 10. And if that's the case, stay with me now. Because I don't have an 8.5 out of 10, you kind of got to round to the nearest number, right? Which technically would be a 9. Right? Do I look at SvR 2011 in the same light I do Shut Your Mouth, though? That's the big thing. And I gotta tell you guys, I don't think I do. Seeing those two games together just doesn't sit right in my soul. And that makes me wonder, hey, does that just mean Shut Your Mouth is a 10 then? I don't know. Let's keep going. I'm going to leave it at I'm going to put it down here for now. Don't get mad at me. Okay, here's where it's going to get very interesting. WWE 12, the Predator engine. A new physics engine, which was good in some ways and bad in others. It was good because now moves could get interrupted. They could happen... Well, they could happen no matter where you were standing in the ring, right? So previously, if you did the 5-knuckle shuffle and your opponent was all the way, like, by the ropes, you would just, like, transport to the middle of the ring and perform the move there. You get sucked into the animation. In WWE 12... Cena would just do the 5-knuckle shuffle wherever you were standing in the ring, which was that was huge. That was a big deal. And so yeah, it was neat in that aspect. But it sucked in other ways because like all the cool weapon physics from 2011 that they worked so hard to implement were now gone. Like that sucked. We had those cool physics for a year and then they vanished. The road to WrestleMania was now, you didn't have like all those different you had like, it was definitely on rails, and you would start off as Cena, then you switch to Sheamus, and yeah, it wasn't as it was just like one story, one road to WrestleMania or whatever, where you would switch protagonists and antagonists and stuff. And I actually do like, I did have fun with that road to WrestleMania, but I still very badly missed season modes from the past. But it was something different, Still had universe mode. It still had all the things that I talked about liking in the previous couple of games, from the Creation Suite perspective. And, this was the last game to feature like a Road to WrestleMania style story. The gameplay, some of the moves were just weird. Like, some of the mocap was just off. I remember like the F5 always looked weird. Just some moves just looked kind of off to me. I think and it doesn't even have a soundtrack, which, is whatever. I'm just throwing that out there. A pretty good universe mode too. I think from 2011, 12, and 13, those were probably my favorite universe modes. I think WWE 12, do I like it better than 2010? I think so. I think I could give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's slightly above average for me. That feels good. Moving on to WWE 13. Ugh, my back. For some reason, gaming chairs are never comfortable for me personally. I don't know. I'm a really tall guy. If you guys can recommend me a good gaming chair, let me know. Maybe I should just like get an office chair or something. WWE 13 has my favorite roster to this date. I love the Attitude Era roster. I love the Shane model in here, the Vince. I love the New Age Outlaws. I love the arenas included. It was the first showcase mode, which is a mode that I've grown to loathe over the years. The Attitude Era mode. But out of all the showcase modes, if you were going to do one, I think WWE 13 did it the best. It was all in-game footage, which was awesome. Cool unlockables, but there was no season mode, no story mode. You still had story designer. You still had a good universe mode, which I had so much. This was the game I played the most universe mode in because of the roster and just making all of these like 90s universe modes. I did like an ECW one. Yeah, I like WWE 13 quite a bit, but it's not... So this is an average game. This is a above average game. This is a good game. And these are great or legendary games. And I don't think it's great or legendary. So I'm going to put it... I liked it a little bit better than 12. But I didn't like it as much as 09, I think. No, I liked it more than 09. But I didn't like it as much as 2007, certainly. So I think that's probably a good spot for it. It's either like at the top of 6 out of 10 or the bottom of 7 out of 10. I'll leave it there for now. Already an hour in. Okay, I'll try to get through this here. Which is actually it works out for me because like a lot of these games are going to start to blend together as I'll talk about. 2K14, the first one under the 2K banner, but still THQ and Ukes had their paw prints all over this one. 30 years of WrestleMania mode. This was the last one that was released on the 360 and PS3 as their like predominant console, I guess. It's a decent game. The gameplay is still good. see, WWE 13 refined that Predator engine, and then I think 2K14 perfected it. I think 2K14 is the culmination of years of that SmackDown versus Raw engine. Like, it took all the best from it and kind of mashed it into this game. So I think the gameplay, this is probably my favorite gameplay out of any 2K game. The 30 years of WrestleMania was pretty cool. It was mostly in-game footage as well. Great roster, good universe mode. Yeah, I mean, there's not too much else to say about it. There was no season mode or anything, no GM mode. Yeah, I'd probably put it in that 6 out of 10. It was a pretty good game, but like it wasn't like my favorite by any means. I would not put it in the same tier or scale rankings, whatever the hell I'm labeling this. I wouldn't put it on the same level as SvR 2007. Let's see, if I had to like split hairs here, I liked it better than 12 and probably better than 09 as well. Yeah, I'd probably put it there. All right, 2K15. You guys, you remember how I said like I was drooling over the screenshots for SmackDown vs. Raw 2007? I was downright, hyperventilating over those first screenshots of John Cena that we saw for 2K15 and Randy Orton. Just gorgeous. The first game to be released on the PS4 and Xbox One era of consoles. It was a visual masterpiece and still holds up well to this day. Unfortunately, the gameplay was just not up to par, at least on the next-gen consoles. It was still pretty good on 360 and PS3 because it was still using the same 2K14 engine. But, yeah, it wasn't... it was just so clunky and stiff, I remember, and just not fun, and the lighting looked weird, too. But the models themselves were good. The showcase mode, I know a lot of people love the showcase mode, like the rivalry between Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and then CM Punk and John Cena. I didn't care about. I mean, I lived through all that. It was still relatively fresh in my head. I didn't really care about any of that. I have memories of playing this game back in the day and being so excited about it, and then playing it and being disappointed. I'm gonna put 2K15. I do own the 360 and PS3 version, and I do think those are superior versions. And I did a whole video on a comparison between the two. If you guys want to check that out on the channel. Oh my goodness, I might give this a 3 out of 10. I know people are gonna start hating. This is where the hate's gonna start in the comments. I know, but I think out of all the 2K games, this is one of the worst 2K games. But it was their first, also. We'll see. I'm going to put it at a 3 out of 10 for now. I do think it's a below average game. It was disappointing. Not a lot of content. I just didn't enjoy it. Decent roster, but didn't enjoy the game. Now we get into 2K16, and I do think they greatly fleshed out the gameplay issues that I had from 15. It played a lot more smoothly. The showcase went back to being focused on I think for the first time it was focused on like a singular superstar because, 2K15 was focused on the rivalries, and then before that we had the 30 years of WrestleMania, and then before that we had the Attitude Era. This one was focused solely on Steve. And so you got to play through different eras of him, stunning Steve Austin. I mean, that was kind of neat. Because I didn't really grow up watching Steve Austin back in those eras, that was actually kind of cool a little bit to see. At least through the eyes of the 2K, like their interpretation of it, because a lot of stuff was rendered. So yeah, it did improve on 2K15, like all good sequels do. And for that reason, I do think you have to bump it up a little bit. But it still was not like my cup of tea from a gameplay perspective or anything. It just... at this point, I was starting to lose a little bit of hope because the games were not... all that excitement I had from 2K taking over for THQ, because Dude, if you were there at the time, don't even try to act like you weren't also just kind of like excited about the prospect of a new company taking over WWE games. And it's one of those cases where the devils you do know are nothing compared to the devils you don't. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Whatever cliche phrase you want to use. I mean, it rang so true in this case because we did not know how damn good we had it. with THQ and Ukes. And Ukes was still developing these games, but like 2K also had their hands in it with their in-house development team. And yeah, these games were starting to suffer as a result. Now that being said, we can move on to 2K17, and I remember the career mode in this game. I was really excited for it, and then when I played it, I realized just how hollow it was. But there are certainly worse 2K career modes that I guess I can talk about later. But yeah, it didn't do a lot for me. Yeah, and backstage areas, just, they would show them off in trailers a lot. And, I would get to play them, and they would just be so, like, the animations, it just felt like you were being sucked into objects instead of the object hitting your opponent would kind of morph into your object. Sorry for hitting the mic there. And, weapons and backstage areas, that's a big deal because that's what this whole series was built on. Hello. And the games were fully shifting to a more sim style. But the problem was, by this point in time, for 2K17, like, they slowed down the gameplay to, like, a snail's pace. To put a greater emphasis on, a sim style. But the problem with that was, by this point in time, 2016, 2017, the in-ring style was a lot faster paced now because guys were getting, called up like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and Finn Balor, and these guys really pushed the pace in the ring. So this slow gameplay that you spent so many years crafting was no longer an accurate representation of the in-ring product. So it wasn't sim, and it certainly wasn't arcade. So what the hell was it? It was a mess. This time period was bad. We're gonna move on to 2K18 here, and this was the first game to drop the old gen being 360 and PS3, and visually you could tell that it was different. Notice how I didn't say better. You could tell that it was different. What hurts this game is just like what a mess it was on the Switch. I remember getting it on the Switch just out of curiosity. I knew it wouldn't be as good, but like it was unplayable. It was broken, which I heard now if you have a Switch 2 and you plug this game into it, it's better, supposedly, allegedly. I haven't done it myself. But yeah, this game is just kind of whatever. This is the point of time where I was just kind of really fed up with the gameplay, and I'm going to throw it into that 4 out of 10 period, and this is very appropriate because in my mind these games really do blend together, these three. I was over it, over the career mode, over the stale slow gameplay. The universe modes were no longer as fun as they used to be. Like, they were so effortless to set up, and like fun organic things would happen from like 2011 to even 2K14, and then yeah, they just were so monotonous and just not fun. And maybe that's just the nature of the mode receiving no updates from a year-to-year basis. I don't know. We'll go to 2K19 here. For some people, this is like their god-tier game. It's not for me. I've made multiple videos about it. I have kind of softened my critiques about it quite a bit over the years. I do think it's one of the better career modes that we've ever gotten out of a 2K game. But, the commentary is horrible. It really is. The commentary on a lot of these games is bad, though. I actually didn't touch on the commentary too much. Shut Your Mouth was Just Bring It had commentary. It was, like, hilariously bad commentary with Cole and Taz. Shut Your Mouth had King and JR short quips, but it was a lot more tolerable. Here Comes the Pain forewent it. SvR really laid the template for what would be the commentary teams, the different brands having Cole and Taz, and then JR and King, and that would be the same for years down the line. But it would be like kind of stock. They wouldn't really interact with what was going on in the match. They would just kind of have like these quips that they would say. And by 2K19, I had grown really sick of that, because I would do big spots like moves off the cell and stuff. I've made videos about the commentary. You guys can check that out if you want to. It's really bad in 2K19. The chain wrestling was cool, but outside of that, I think it's a bit overrated. But it's still a good game. I think you can be a good game, but still be overrated. That being said, it's above average. I'd probably put it right on the same tier as 2K14 and 2K19. I remember doing the towers, and that was kind of like when I play my faction now, like the boss battles. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Um, yeah. By this point, also you could customize like actual superstars on the roster. You could do that for years now. I forgot to talk about like the superstar threads and stuff, like which I think was first introduced in 2K14, just a basic version where you could customize just the ring attire. And by this point, it was fully in depth. And yeah, that was Yuke's THQ and or not THQ, but Yuke's the development team swan song, because 2K20 would drop, and of course it was I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. If your game is virtually unplayable, then you know it is what it is. There were so many bugs and glitches, so many game crashes. The hair physics were just out of control, just a complete mess of a game. But give 2K credit, because they did the correct thing that I wish more game companies would do. They took a year off. Imagine that. They just took a year off, and they came back and dropped this butte, 2K22, which I think the gameplay was better than it had been. A lot better. Probably the best 2K gameplay since 2K14. You know, still the same old showcase mode that featured, you know, a focus on one superstar. This time it was Rey Mysterio. Don't really care for that, but, you know, Rey's my dude, so I liked having all the different attires for him. But I like this kind of gameplay. It's not my favorite, definitely, but I like the pick up and play nature of it. It's very combo focused. It sucks that the reversal button is now just one button. I do want to touch on 2K19. Part of the reason why it's not like a 7 or anything for me is because I hate that reversal system where you had just a stock amount of reversals, and you could be depleted of them, and you would have to wait for them to replenish to be able to reverse something. I don't think you should ever just be a punching bag in any of these games. I think you should always have an opportunity to defend yourself. So yeah, 2K22 has, you know, now we're getting into the stun meter, which, you know, I can talk about another day. I don't like that as well, because again, you should never be defenseless. Being groggy, sure. You know, being in a dazed state where you can't move, sure. But I think you should always have an opportunity to defend yourself. You know, my favorite games, you'll notice, you know, well, Here Comes the Pain, you had multiple ways to counter initial opening strikes or grapples, at least, you know, left trigger and right trigger. And then some of my least favorite games just had one button for like a reversal. In 2K22, you know, this whole reversal system from this new iteration of 2K, do you guys really want to hear me talk about the reversal system again? No, I've talked about it way too much. If I could do, like, as long as this video's been so far, I could do a whole nother hour just talking about reversals. But needless to say, I don't care for the triangle or Y reversal system. Yeah, but I do think 2K22 is a decent enough game, and I do think it improved off of these bad boys. And I prefer it over 2K19, I think. I'm gonna bump it above average here, because it innovated, and you know, now they had the Mirai stories that have kind of become formulaic over the past few years, where they had like overarching stories, I guess, if you want to put it that way. We'll move on to 2K23, and this one I'm gonna put at a 5 out of 10, because it did not innovate. It didn't innovate as much from 2K22 as 2K22 did from that disaster of 2K20, which, you know, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. That being said, yeah, not too much stands out for me personally. We're starting to get into just like the My Faction era of 2K, which, again, I could go on another hour-long video rant about. But yeah, these games became quite formulaic here. 2K24, of course, I'm putting them in average because they're fine games, but like nothing is included in them that really puts them in the upper echelon. See, what separates these games from these games is all of these games also released, you know, 1 year apart from each other, but they all felt vastly different from the last. They were completely different games with new game modes, new features, new gameplay mechanics, and these ones not so much. You know, especially these jabronis down here. And yeah, they did bring back GM mode, but like I touched on earlier, it's not the kind of free GM mode we had previously. It's a very structured. It's like a game board, you know. It's like a Monopoly or something. And then 2K25, the most recent one, probably the 2K game I spent the most time playing. But then again, that's not saying much. I'm tempted to put this at a 4 out of 10 because I hate the island, and I hate that that's a new game mode that, again, is going to take resources away from game modes that we actually do like that don't get a lot of attention, like Universe and My Rise. And don't say that it's not, because it totally is. You only have so many people on a development team. There's only so many. There's only so much manpower to go around that it's inevitable that, you know, if you're not putting the maximum amount of resources into one game mode, it's going to suffer for it. It just is, guys. So I do kind of want to put it at a 4 out of 10 for that reasoning. The island sucks, and now, of course, that's the staple, right? We're going to get it in new games. And yeah, I know you don't have to pay money to play it, but let me say this, because I know what the critics are going to say. They're going to say, well, Joe, how could you say that you don't like the silliness of the island when part of the reason why you like these two games so much is because of their arcade nature and their silliness? Well, these still take place within the context of the wrestling universe, you know? Like fighting backstage and stuff and having a backstage brawl. I mean, that stuff happened on WWE TV at the time. The island is just like, I don't know what the hell it is. It's just, it's too over the top without a payoff as rewarding as blowing up cars by throwing your opponent into them. You know, I don't want to fight robot superhero Roman Reigns, you know? I don't want to see wrestlers locked behind a game mode that I don't want to play. I don't want to have to spend VC to unlock said wrestlers. I don't like that pre-order bonuses are just like taunts that you can use in the... I don't like locking anything behind a game mode, which is my problem with my faction and the island. And because of the inclusion of these kind of gacha game modes, I don't envision a 2K game ever cracking this great game echelon. But we'll see. You know, I'm holding out hope. But I think this is my rankings for now, guys. This is my definitive WWE SmackDown through 2K game rankings. Thanks for sticking it out so far. What we did, hour and 15, hour and 17. I do appreciate it. I mean, while you're here, you might as well leave a comment letting me know what I did wrong, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Don't forget to do all the other YouTube stuff for me, like the video, sub, all that good stuff. And yeah, until next time, guys, I'll catch you then. We'll talk some more 2K in the future. Be well and take care. Peace. Whew, that was a long video.